to Helicopter Lessons in 10 Minutes or Less. I'm Jacob, and in this video I want to expand more on what I covered in my first video, Dissymmetry of Lift. More specifically, I want to break down the 5 different areas of the rotor disc that have drastically different aerodynamic characteristics. Now, by expanding more on this, it makes explaining retreating blade stall a little bit easier. Now, if you remember from my first video, I explained how the advancing blade will produce more lift than the retreating blade if left uncompensated for. So if this is our rotor disc, the axis of rotation, rotor disc rotating counterclockwise, and let's say the aircraft is moving forward to the 12 o'clock position, the relative airflow impacting the rotor disc in this manner causes the advancing side to generate more lift than the retreating side of the rotor blade. But to go into more detail, there are parts of the rotor that can be broken down even further. Now, the part of the blade closest to the hub on the retreating side experiences an aerodynamic characteristic of a reverse flow, which will be the first region that we have here. So, reverse flow. Now, this means that the airfoil literally flows from the trailing edge to the leading edge and therefore does not produce lift. So this is going to be the area right here. So another way to depict this is if we have an airfoil right here, instead of air impacting at the leading edge, it's impacting at the trailing edge. So what's happening right here is it's impacting the wing or the airfoil in a way that is completely useless. It's not able to generate any kind of lift. Now, this is all based on the fact that at any given RPM, the blade tip is going to travel faster than the blade hub. So in this region, there's just quite literally more forward air velocity in the rotor disc than there is rotational velocity. And let me dictate there's the axis of rotation. So this is all on the retreating side closest to the hub that this is happening. So it's the reverse flow of air over the airfoil. Now, the next region is going to be called a negative stall region. And this is going to be still on the retreating side, but just a little bit further outboard, not as close inboard. Now, simply put, a blade stalls if the resultant airflow is outside of the critical angle. So what is a critical angle? Well, every single airfoil is designed to have a critical angle that's usually, anywhere from 15 to 20 degrees. Every airfoil is different. But basically, an angle that if airflow is in that angle, it's useful. If it's outside that angle, it's not really advantageous to the airfoil. So let's say the critical angle is any airflow that impacts any flow that impacts the airfoil in this region. So a negative stall, it's negative because it's impacting above the chord line, and it's stall because it's useless airflow that's just resulting in turbulent flow of air, loss of lift. So what's happening is it's impacting roughly around here, and this is going to be your negative stall area. So in essence, the induced flow causes the airflow to push down on the airfoil outside of the critical angle where it's useless. So you're not getting any kind of useful lift here. Now, moving even more outboard, you're going to get to a region known as the negative lift. And I know what you're thinking, lift, that means it's good, right? Well, not necessarily. Now, this region is also negative because the airflow is impacting the airfoil above the chord line, but it's considered lift because it's still inside the critical angle. So at this point in the blade, the rotational speed combined with the induced flow causes the resultant to be inside the critical angle and generate some sort of useful airflow, so the airfoil can take advantage of it, but it's not necessarily in the direction that you want it to. So the airfoil is no longer stalling, it's creating lift, but because it's negative lift, it pushes the airfoil down instead of up. So what's happening is it's impacting roughly around in here, in this region, where it's inside the critical angle, still above the chord line. So airfoil is performing like it should, and that the airfoil coming through that critical angle is not being turbulent, but it's not really working for you in this instance. It's aerodynamically the same as if you were to impart negative pitch in the blades. Now, these 3 regions right here are collectively known as the no lift areas. because they're not really doing anything to produce lift for you. These regions tend to grow on the retreating side with higher air speeds and shrink with lower air speeds. Now outside of these regions is what's known as positive lift. So we'll just call that, or label that as D, positive lift. And now this is the good stuff. Just like the name implies, positive lift. We need this stuff to fly. You can see there's a lot more on this advancing side than there is on the retreating side. This is why we have the compensation for dissymmetry of lift. But in essence, the resultant airflow is inside the critical angle and below the chord line, which produces positive lift. So where that airflow is coming is right in this region right here. So it's impacting inside the critical angle, below the chord line, pushes the airfoil up. We have good airflow over the airfoil, not a lot of turbulent air. The airfoil is able to harness that resultant airflow and create lift out of it. Now, for more info on how lift is created, I'd recommend checking my video on how lift is created. I actually outline a little bit more in detail about the process, or the how lift and how airfoils actually harness the airfoil and make lift out of it. But I'll put that link in the description, and I'll put a link above as well. Now, there is another region that can appear here. Now with enough forward airspeed, the fifth region begins to develop right here on the retreating side. And this region is going to be known as positive stall. Now the positive stall condition begins to form on the retreating side, and it's because the airflow is below the chord line, and it's a stall because the airflow is outside of the critical angle. So just like we had the negative stall where it's outside the critical angle, now we're having a positive stall, it's outside the critical angle, but in this essence, it's positive because it's impacting on the bottom side or underneath the chord line. Now airflow is separating from the airfoil, and you're no longer getting increase in lift with increases in angle of attack because it's not impacting the airfoil in a useful angle. So if this begins to develop more and more, usually with higher speeds, you begin getting into a retreating blade stall. So this region, as you get faster and faster and faster, begins to grow and grow and grow until this entire portion of your disc is really not producing any type of lift. It's growing more and more. The retreating side of your blade or your rotor system is beginning to stall, usually as a result of exceeding the velocity never exceed, or V and E. But I wanted to use this video as a segue. My next one's gonna get more into retreating blade stall, what it is, how to get in, or how to avoid it, what to look for. But this wraps up the expanded version of Dissymmetry of Lift. Simply put, there's 5 different regions of the rotor disc that all experience lift, or they all experience different aerodynamic qualities. They are reverse flow, negative stall, negative lift, and positive stall. But thanks for watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe and leave a comment. Once again, I'm Jacob, and this has been Helicopter Lessons in 10 minutes or less. Safe flying.